My name is Jesse Whyte, and I'm a PhD student working on the intersection of myth and philosophy. So if we packed this auditorium with all the leading minds of philosophy, literature, and history, and we told them to come up with a definition of history, or a definition of myth, and a unifying theory of how it works, and an understanding of why that's important, and we locked the doors and didn't let them out until they did that, we'd be here for a really long time. My personal favorite definition of myth is pretty inoffensive. It's that it's a narrative with power or a story with significance. Campbell went for the jugular. He preferred the idea that myths are just other people's religion. And he really quickly doubled down after that and say religion is really nothing but mythology, misunderstood literally instead of symbolically. But that doesn't mean that myth is a lie. In this post-Enlightenment era, we have this superficial tendency to consider myth as a sort of proto-science or a new way of experiencing the world. Myth is a living experience, but it's something that's kind of beyond the capacity of signs or symbols to contain. Because while similar, myth isn't science either. In mythology, we have our experiments, we call them adventures, but where science seeks to reduce, mythology is really happy to rest in the wonder of experience. It resists the urge to oversimplify. Myth essentially is a metaphor. The word literally means carrying over. It's a bridge to the far shore in the way by which the psyche comes into relationship with the other. In a profound and meaningful way. But why does any of this matter? Why do you care? And I'll make two arguments to you today. First is it matters because it's the way by which we can best come to know ourselves. It's the way we can best decipher the dilemma of our existential plight. Secondly, it matters because if you're not making an active decision and choosing which myths guide your lives, other people are out there doing it for you. For me, there are two especially relevant theories of myth for the 21st century citizen. One is psychological and one is ideological. For Campbell and Jung, they're the masters of the former. For them, mythic imagery comes from the depths of the psyche, and in essence from something biological that's underneath that. We'll get back to Marx in a second. For Jung, myth serves as a way to activate and to touch base with the unconscious, which lies forever beyond and past where you can reach with your conscious mind. So it's a way of foraying and discovering the truth that is your whole existence. The poet Yeats likens the process of mythic transformation to a lunar cycle. He said that early in life, when we're aware of our potential, that we're wearing what he called a primary mask, and that later on in life we come into conflict with social expectations, which he called an antithetical mask. Now, somewhere in the midpoint of our life, we have a little bit of an existential shock. We realize we're wearing the emperor's new clothes, and we've become someone we didn't intend to be. For Jung's model, myth illuminates a path back to that original self. Now, you'll notice that we've been discussing a whole lot more theory than content, and there's one big reason for that. It's because Eliot describes the 20th and the 21st century as a wasteland, which means precisely that it's what people are doing what other people want them to do, and not what they want to do themselves. So when Nietzsche proclaims the death of God at the end of the 19th century, he's not an assassin, he's just a herald. The Enlightenment had taught us enough to know that we couldn't take the Old Testament literally anymore. It didn't describe history and the world as we knew it, and so we had to move past that. God's death left a vacuum, and so materialism and positivism race in to fill the vacuum, but the promise of the Enlightenment had been broken. Reason alone is not going to be enough to help us solve our existential plight. So there's basically three options. One, we can go back to the old way and kind of apologize for it. Two, we can kind of hope that materialism is going to eventually solve all the human suffering. Or three, we can construct something new. So the choice seems obvious if we believe in the possibility of progress, but we always have to worry that somewhere behind the scenes, someone's manipulating what we want to believe in order to further someone else's means. So there's no possible freedom from ideology, but that doesn't necessarily mean that ideology, this sort of superstructure on which we build our civilization, these big ideas, always has to be oppressive. Ideology can stand for good things as well. Consider Huck Finn. Twain manifests sort of a latent cultural power that's in our psyche. He creates an American myth that resonates with the basic ideals of humanism, of what it means to be human and to be alive, and that struggles against outdated institutions like slavery. Discussing the Grail legend, Campbell says that the salvation of the world comes from one acting out of the nature of one's noble heart spontaneously. Where there's a way or a path, he says, that's another person's way. I believe he's precisely right. Ideology always has the potential to seep into our unconscious and distort our perception of reality. Art, especially kinds of didactic art, has the potential to be an ideology engine and lead us to think what someone else wants us to think. We have to choose our myths wisely. Myth and art go hand in hand. There's high art, there's the low art. As human beings, we have to be careful about which mythologies we allow to enter our lives because it directly affects our experience of being human. As artists, we have to be careful about which mythologies we want to amplify because we run the risk of supporting someone else's agenda. Jung writes that Picasso did not deposit in Guernica what he thought about the world. Rather, he endeavors to understand the world through the making of Guernica. Art, infused by myth, is the way that we can transcend these flawed inherited value systems and affect a lasting change in hearts and minds, most notably yours.